This is our quick introduction into cells, what a cell is, and cell theory. So let's get going. All right, so cell theory. There's a very rich history on this. I'll probably provide a video on it, how we came to this point, but I'm less so worried about the history, more so that we understand what cell theory is today. So cell theory, it's the idea that the cell is the basic unit of life. Anything smaller than a cell is not considered alive. So if the cell is larger, it's alive. All living things are made up of cells. That's our second component. Either one or more cells, right? We can't have single-celled organisms like this amoeba, or we can have multicellular organisms like all these, this Elodia right here, which is a plant, right? We're humans, us, we're a multicellular organism, right? And the last part, all cells come from pre-existing cells. So this seems kind of silly to us now, but it's this idea that cells don't just pop into existence, right? They come from a pre-existing cell which divided to provide the genetic information for the current cells that we have around today. So cells are the basic unit of life. All things are made up of either one or more cells, and cells come from pre-existing cells. So all cells on this planet all share four things in common, okay? They all have a plasma membrane that surrounds the cell. It's composed of a phospholipid bilayer. All cells have a cytoplasm, a filling up of that, all that stuff inside of that plasma membrane. That's what we call the cytoplasm. It's a jelly-like filling of the cell in which all of the functional components of the cell are found. So all the enzymes that carry out work for the cell. If the cell has organelles, those organelles will be found in the cytoplasm, right? Proteins that give the cell structure, all that kind of stuff. It's all found in the cytoplasm. All cells have DNA, genetic material that encodes for instructions for how to build protein and other molecules and helps to direct the functions of the cell and give each cell its unique properties. And ribosomes. All cells have ribosomes, which are specific cell machinery parts that are used to build proteins based on instructions that they receive from the DNA. So cells are small. Most cells we cannot see with our unaided eye. Most cells are kind of in this range right here between, at least eukaryotic cells are in this range between 10 micrometers and 100 micrometers. There are a few cells that are large enough for us to see with our naked eyes, like a frog egg is one cell, a chicken egg is one cell, right? So those are exceptions. Those are exceptionally large cells, but most cells tend to kind of be in this range right here, at least eukaryotic cells. Bacterial cells are much smaller. They're less than a micrometer to, on the large side, more like 8 micrometers. So they're very small. Most of the time we can't see a single cell with our naked eye. But the reason why most cells are small is because the smaller a cell is, the larger the surface area it has. So everything a cell needs to survive needs to come through its plasma membrane, through that surface area. And the smaller you are, you have a larger surface area to the cell than you do compared to the internal volume ratio, right? So for example, this cell, let's say it's 1 millimeter on each side. It's a cube. It's 1 millimeter on each side. The surface area of the plasma membrane that this cell has, which should transport materials in and out, whether that's oxygen, whether it's water, that's food, getting rid of carbon dioxide and waste. That surface area on this 1 millimeter cube cell has 6 millimeters of surface area for which to transport all of those goods. Its internal volume, if it's 1 millimeter on each side, is 1 millimeter cubed. So that gives us what we call a surface area to volume ratio of 6:1. So for every 1 unit of volume, internal volume, there are 6 units of surface area. So it's pretty high. As opposed to, let's say we took this really large cell. This cell is 4 millimeters on each side. Its surface area, if it's 4 millimeters on each side and it's a cube, its surface area is 96 millimeters, but its internal volume is 64 millimeters cubed. So while yes, it does have a larger surface area compared to our 1 millimeter cube, its internal volume is massive, which gives us a surface area to volume ratio that's much lower. So for every 1 unit of volume, this cell only has 1.5 units of surface area. So it's going to have actually less surface area per volume in this large cell to transport materials in and out of the cell. So smaller cells are more efficient at transporting material in and out of their cell, because everything that cell needs to survive and all the waste it needs to get rid of has to cross that plasma membrane. Higher surface area, more surface area you have to do that, the more efficiently you can transport materials. So there are two main types of cells. We will focus on both the eukaryotic and the prokaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells are cells that exist in domain bacteria and domain archaea. They tend to be smaller, and they tend to have less internal machinery going on. As opposed to a eukaryotic cells tend to be larger, and they have many specialized organelles inside of a eukaryotic cell. So prokaryotes, they do not have organelles. Their DNA is also not encased in a nucleus, as opposed to a eukaryotic cell that has many different types of organelles, like here's the mitochondria, here's some lysosomes, here's the rough ER, right? And their DNA in a eukaryotic cell is encased in a nucleus. So their DNA is protected in an extra membrane-bound layer right here. As opposed to prokaryote, their DNA is just floating out in the cytoplasm. Okay, so again, prokaryotic cell, they have DNA, but it's not contained in a nucleus. Okay, so it's just free floating in the cytoplasm. They don't have any membrane-bound organelles. Organelle means a mini organ. It's cellular machinery that carries out specific functions for that cell. And they have, most prokaryotes have some sort of cell wall that surrounds their plasma membrane. Oftentimes, this wall is a combination of starch or peptidoglycan. Sometimes it might also have some polysaccharides in there. So it's an extra layer surrounding that plasma membrane that helps to give a little bit extra protection to prokaryotes. Eukaryotic cells, though, are cells with membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria, like chloroplasts, like the Golgi, right? Which we'll get into the functions of the organelles later. Eukaryotic cells do have their DNA contained inside of the nucleus, and they tend to be much larger than prokaryotic cells. So this is a cheek cell. So this entire thing right here is an epithelial cheek cell from a human. This is the nucleus. And these tiny little dots right here, those are bacteria. So that's a prokaryotic cell. Okay, so just to give a sense of scale of the difference in the size of prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells. All members of domain eukarya have eukaryotic cells, and archaea and bacteria domains have prokaryotic cells.